Okay, I'm making this video to show that the Rife frequencies, the fundamental frequencies at 3.1 megahertz, and the dot that you see appearing, if you look very closely, is as it sweeps by Rife's frequency, and the sweep range is from 50 hertz to 150 kilohertz. So as you can see, is when it starts to generate, it generates all kinds of sidebands, which, by the way, are in Rife's frequencies, which is in the radio band. None of Rife's frequencies were ever in the audio range, so if you think they are, you're making a big mistake, and the transmitter must put this out or you're not going to get it. So transmitter's a MOPA down here, and the master power oscillator, and of course the tube is an H-gas tube at the top. The Fanatron tube now changes the frequency, so you must adjust the transmitter and the audio to run the Fanatron, since the spacing is much different. This is an original MOPA that I first designed in 2000, and I've modified the audio amplifier to do this and run with the MOPA. Now, what you'll notice is there's your fundamental frequency. See, it's right at 3.1 center. And as you apply the audio, it shifts the oscillator a little bit. So what you want to do is bring it back towards just a little above 3001 or 3.1 megahertz, excuse me. And you must generate these bands. If you don't generate these bands, you do not have a real Rife machine. Now I'm going to make this short little video here to show you that this center line right here is 3.1 megahertz. And you can see the little dots floating here. And that's indicating that the oscillator is wobbling. Now this is pretty common for the MOPA, which is the master power oscillator amplifier. So as you can see here, as I tune the MOPA, I can shift the frequency where I want it. So we want it about 3.1 because we want the most sidebands generated. So now, if we generate some sidebands here by turning the sweep oscillators on, you can see how it generates these bands. Now the frequency is going to end up being over here, right in this range here. So I'll set that and I'll come back. Okay, now I'm back, and you can see that the oscillator set to 3.214688 megahertz, which is in 1/10 of 1 meter of Rife's frequency. But since it's sweeping, it's going to hit the correct one anyway. But the dot, you can see, ends up here being the most powerful sideband in the frequency. So as it generates, you can see how many times it steps the frequency on its way up. Okay, now the master power oscillator is the MOPA right here, and this tuning capacitor right here allows you to shift the frequency that I just did with the fundamental. The tube is an H-gas tube. That's this tube here, and it's on right now. It's generating. So actually it's the power oscillator's at about, I would say, about 75 watts right now. And when you use the Fanatron tube, the capacitance is going to change. So that means that the MOPA, you'll have to change the frequency in the MOPA, and it's probably best to use this instrument right here. Now, one thing that I want to point out is the MOPA, it's very important on the audio signal that you generate. And once again, I'm going to tell you that none of these frequencies that's being generated here are in the audio range, because we're going from 50 hertz sweep to 150 kilohertz, or excuse me, 120 kilohertz on this one. So all Rife's frequencies known are in the radio band. There's not one of them that's an audio signal. So unless you generate exactly what you see right here, you don't have a Rife machine. It's not even considered a Rife machine, because Rife used no audio frequencies. The audio frequencies used were changed by John Crane, and that's not correct. Crane thought that he could use a paddle and a regular frequency generator that you bought off the shelf, and he could just lower them down by 10 and this would work. But that's not true. That's not going to work. Rife was very particular on the instrument that did this, and Philip Hoyland is the one that gets the credit for this, because it's sort of ingenious the way it generates this. You can see here. And so that's why nobody ever knew the frequencies, because Philip Hoyland could change the fundamental frequency, and then you could change the sweep generator to match up his frequency. So it's really important that you understand that you just can't buy a generator that's putting square waves out in the audio range from 20 to 2125 and expect any kind of results whatsoever except for stimulation. In other words, you might as well just buy a tens unit, because that's what you're going to get. Nothing. And Rife was pretty precise about the way that this worked, because you have to be right on or you have nothing. So I think it was 1/10 of 1 meter, which is about 800 cycles. So see, you're at 3, 2, 4, 6, 8 here, which puts you well in range. But since you're sweeping the whole band with a sweep oscillator, and you're going to hit it no matter what you do, and you're going to hit the other things too, because we could actually pick another thing and put it in here, and you'll see that it'll end up on the correct sideband. But I wanted you to understand that. I'll give you one more look here at the tube. And of course the audio frequency is up here. You can see it being sweeped. Okay. Sorry about the glare, but that's the way it is. So, and that's what you must have. And that's what I have to say about it. And it's pretty precise on the way you got to do this. This is generated with a triode tube, and I think it's an 812 in there, and it's the plate's at about 600 volts here, and it just has to be done this way. And the grid coupling is very important, because you can see the shift here. If I take the audio frequencies away, you can see the fundamental rock backwards and forwards. That's due to the power supply ripple. And that's kind of a good thing, because you want it to waver like that a little bit back and forth. That way you cover pretty much everything you're going to try to get. And that's what happens when you put the audio in. So I can generate the most bands here, which means I can cover just about anything I want with his frequencies. And once again, you cannot just use the fundamental or the low RF frequencies. That's not how this machine works. This machine must have both of these two combined. What Hoyland called his audio frequencies and the fundamental frequency, or you're not going to have a Rife machine. It's just not going to work. Thanks. frequencies, the fundamental frequencies at 3.1 megahertz. And the dot that you see appearing, if you look very closely, is as it sweeps by, which, by the way, are in Rife's frequencies, which is in the radio band. None of Rife's frequencies were ever in the audio range, so Rife's frequency. And the sweep range is from 50 hertz to 150 kilohertz. So as you can see, is when it starts to generate, it generates all kinds of sideband. If you think they are, you're making a big mistake, and the transmitter must put this out or you're not going to get it. So transmitter's a MOPA. I'm making this video to show that the Rife frequency